Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fall 2019 The Ed Collab Gathering. We are so excited to have all of you join us here. Right now, we have close to, it's about 2,000 of you from around the world that are already tuning in for today's gathering, and typically that number grows across the day. So hi, this is just a snapshot of some of the many of you that are tuning in, but hi to Ecuador, Oman, Japan, Brazil, Australia, the US, Canada, United Kingdom, Mexico, Qatar, India, and everyone else, everywhere else, all around the world. Oops, I just picked up my little chat box there, sorry. We are so honored to have you spending your Saturday with us, or for some of you, it's just a day before, a day after, if I get my world time zones correctly. It might be nighttime for you as well. But we're so happy to have you here. Some of you are also joining us in the future because this gathering, like all gathering conferences, we not only stream online, but then they are all archived right on this site. So if you would like to come back and watch a session that you missed, or even more importantly, if you are during one of our sessions today and you see 3 workshops and you want to go to all of them, then just pick one live and you can watch the other as a recording. So here's a little bit of info on how this day works in case you're new or if you'd like a refresher because you're back with us. So the EdCollab gathering is entirely online. And so the great thing about that is you can watch from anywhere. Some of you are watching on maybe your Twitter app right now. Some of you are watching on YouTube. A bunch of you are watching here on our website, the gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. But wherever you are, wherever you're watching, one part of the EdCollab's belief about learning is that we should connect together. And so you can also use social media to not just watch live, but also to talk together. So if you go to hashtag the EdCollab gathering, if you are on Twitter, use hashtag the EdCollab gathering. And from there, you can tweet and see what other people are saying about today's session. Now, when you go into the actual workshops, you access those either from at the EdCollab or on the banner at the top of our webpage. And there, for example, if you wanted to see Carla and Luce's session, it is workshop number 1 during session 1. The way that you can talk about that session with other people watching that session from literally anywhere, I mean, quite literally anywhere in the world, is to use hashtag the EdCollab gathering, space, hashtag, and the session number. So if it's session 1 or 2 or 15 or wherever it is, if I pop over here just really quickly and pull up the agenda for you, you can see all of the sessions have numbers on them. So if we wanted to tweet along to Troy Hicks's session, for example, you'd put hashtag the EdCollab gathering, hashtag number 3, and that would take you right to him. When you're on a session page, that's where you also can access the workshop number. You'll see that right on the top. So all sessions you can access from our top menu or by following us at the EdCollab on Twitter. Now, this is a day where we have people from literally all over the world presenting using technology, and technology doesn't always go the way we want it to, including even this morning before you saw us live on the page, we weren't on the page yet because one little link was 1 letter off and we had to quick fix that. So things happen during the day and we have an incredible volunteer tech team. They're all educators who work behind the scenes to make sure that today goes well. But because technology doesn't always play the way that we want, here's a few important things for you to do as well. Number 1, if you're on a page and things are not doing what you think they're supposed to do, click refresh. And if you click refresh and they still aren't doing what you think they should supposed to do, go over to at the EdCollab on Twitter, and that's our main way that we'll communicate with all of you today. We'll post announcements or tell you if other things are going on or sessions starting late or if we have some issue. But usually hitting play or hitting refresh and then play will take you right to the live stream. OK, so that is some logistics. So another, I guess, logistics, what's more important, it's like our heart and soul around today's gathering, is that everything that we do today is totally free. It's important to us that we celebrate the education community, that educators and authors and writers and people that work with children get to tell their own stories, get to share their own experiences, get to not have others decide for us what it means to be an educator, but instead to share our own work with each other. And access to that is critically important. And so today's session is a workshop conference is completely free. Now, a conference like this, you may typically pay for maybe a hotel or a flight, or certainly you'd probably pay for lunch, or almost definitely most of us here would pay for coffee. I haven't had my morning coffee yet. That's why a few of my words are getting jumbled. Later today, you'll see me a little bit fresher. But you certainly would normally pay something to get to a conference or to attend a conference. Today, you just tune in. So what we'd like you to consider, and we do this at every gathering, is what would you have spent money on today, whether it's for registration or food or coffee or a cab fare? And instead of spending any of that with us here at the Ed Collab, instead we ask you to pay today's joy forward. Every Ed Collab gathering, we invite our keynote speakers to adopt a charity with us. And so these are the charities that we have adopted for today. The first is Circle of Health International, which we'll talk a little bit about in just a second. And Christina will tell you more about as well when she speaks. That's been adopted by Christina, our opening keynote. And then Min adopted an open book Children's Literacy Foundation for the afternoon. So both of these you'll hear about all today. And we invite you to please, please, please come to gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com and to click on the little button off to the side that says Adopted Charities, or you can click on even the logo right there that says an open book and Circle of Health. When you click on those, you'll be taken to a page where you can read why Christina and Min adopted those charities for us today. And there also are links to go directly to those charities so you can donate on their own websites directly to them. No money will come through us for this. If there are other charities that you also want to adopt to or you want to donate to or in addition to, we invite you to do that as well. The main thing that we hope we all do together as an education community is we think about what are the sorts of monetary things we would have spent on today, and how can we take that and instead of paying for this amazing day that you're going to take part in, instead, how can I give that forward to groups that are doing real work that can really support others? So please join us in paying the joy forward today, and you'll hear more about all of this as we go. There is a pre-session. So this is one that I already recorded, actually recorded last night. And that's a session that you can learn more about learning with the Ed Collab. So the gathering is just one of many things that we do during the year in addition to our keynote speaking, professional development in schools, and lots of other free and low-cost ways of learning with us, including our study series, which you saw a bunch of slides coming up around that earlier. The study series registration opens October 7th. So if you click on pre-session at any point today, you can hear, it's only a half hour, it's a little shorter than other sessions. You can hear about the study series and lots of other ways of working with us. Okay, so before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just have a few minutes to help us kind of get our mind set for this entire day. One question that I found myself asking very smart people that I admire a lot, and I'd say even just the past few weeks, like I was just working with a district in Connecticut, and Sarah Brost, their curriculum coordinator for literacy at the secondary level, at the middle school, I asked her this same question. So I keep asking people this question: what is literacy for? And I'm not asking that to try to judge or try to see what do you think. I'm asking that question because I really have been struggling with that myself. We have kids day in and day out in our classrooms, in our reading workshops and writing workshops and vocabulary, and other times during the day, we have kids doing all of this stuff. We're teaching them lessons, they're reading and writing, they're talking, they're maybe in guided reading groups, or they're on computers. There's all this stuff we're doing all of the time. But sometimes I just shake myself and kind of step back and say, well, what's it all for? And many times answers are these. It's for, like Sarah was just saying, empathy and connection. Like for her, literacy is a way that you get to know the world and people in it, and you get to see our human connection. Some people say it's for critical thinking. Some say that it's for finding strength in one's own voice, that kids can kind of write their lives. Sometimes it's about creativity and expression and composing and creating. All of those are big, important, crucial reasons why literacy exists, why we're all teaching in this field, why we all do this with kids every day. But then the thing I reflect on is, how do we reckon with the fact that all of those things on the left there aren't totally present in our world, aren't totally present in our politics, aren't totally present in our interpersonal connections? If every person who's around us has been through school, has been in the same classrooms that we're all in, why aren't those things as present as they could be? And maybe to not get too big, but even more specific, why aren't those things always present in our instruction either? If we want to create students' own voices, why do we sometimes fall into the trap of formulaic essay writing? If we want to create empathy and connection, why do we sometimes fall into the trap of making sure that everyone is reading To Kill a Mockingbird all at the same time, all for several weeks, because that's what we're going to do, instead of really thinking, what are the kinds of connections that our children need to make? Or even more so, where's creativity and expression in our reading logs? Um, Clearly, there are things in teaching that we do that are just helping us take small steps towards bigger things. Scaffolding is something we all believe in. But I'd like us to think this before we start today. Imagine that there is a fence, and on that fence, on one side is compassion, and on the other is mistrust. Or on one side is access, and on the other is denial. Or on one side is justice, or on one side is care, or on one side is creativity. We can't be on the fence. We can't just stand in one place. Because if I'm standing between justice and injustice, I'm doing nothing. If I'm standing in between creativity and kids all falling into line in just one way, you can't have both sides. And so the work for us to consider today, as you're here with us in this gathering, is how do we be braver than we've been before to commit, to say, you know what, one of the things on that list, or maybe all the things on that list, but even start with one thing on that list, I'm not going to stand on the fence for anymore. It's not going to be okay for me that we teach essays only in this way. I can't do that any longer. It's not okay for me that we're not helping kids have freedom and creativity as much as they could. I'm not going to do that anymore. There's a Paulo Freire quote where he says, language is never neutral. And it's a reminder to us that everything we write and everything we say always has some kind of political expression, always has some kind of decision making behind it. Language is never neutral, which means every time we speak and write, we're making a decision which side of that fence we're going to be on. Literacy, teaching, and learning is never neutral either. So this brings me to introducing our special guest this morning, who we're so excited to have along with us. Christina Soontornvat is a author of many, many books and series. And as you can see, this is a still from her website, has many books that are coming out soon too. Some of which I hope that she talks about during her session today. But here it is. Here is my copy of Diaries of an Ice Princess #1, which I have been taking with me to schools everywhere. And you can't electronically sign this, but next conference I see you at, Christina, I'm bringing this with me. She also has one of the series. The newest one is coming out in October, which Christina on Twitter said, I forgot October's next week. So it's coming out very, very soon. You can find Christina at her website, soontornvat.com, or that's how you can follow her on Twitter as well, but I'm sure you already are. Christina has also adopted for us today Circle of Health International, which supports people across the country in a variety of needs. And one of their big pushes right now is supporting those who are migrating to the US, and many who are migrating to the US who, as you know, are facing persecution and danger. And so it's a really important charity, and we're so glad that you chose it for us. So without further ado, and then I'll stop sharing so that you can take over, I'd like to introduce and welcome Christina Soontornvat today. Hi, Christina.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Chris.
Hi, yay, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I loved your intro. I love those big questions you were asking, and that really inspires me to ask myself, where am I standing on the fence, and to get off of the fence and get on the right side. So thank you for that so much.
Thank you.
It's just a total honor to be speaking with you guys today. It's an honor to be keynoting along with my good friend Min Lay, who's going to be talking later in the day. And I'm so excited to hear what he has to say. And just the whole agenda for the day is going to be wonderful. So much good learning going on, and I love what the Ed Collaborative does. And thank you so much to everyone who is donating to the adopted charities. I chose Circle of Health International because there is indeed a big humanitarian crisis that's happening, and it's just a few hours south of where I am in Austin. And they are doing great work there. I have friends who have volunteered with them, who, vouch for their experience with them. So it felt very personal that I wanted to include them as my charity. Okay, so today I am going to be talking about representation. And along the way, I'm going to tell you about myself as a kid reader. I'm going to talk about Chinese restaurants and engineering and science museums. And it's going to seem like kind of a twisty path to get back around to books, but I promise we're going to get there in the end. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I'll start off with telling you just a little bit about my books. So as Chris said, I have some books coming out. By this time next year, I'm going to have 12 books out in the world for young readers. And these are my first books. So this is a middle grade fantasy series called The Changelings. And it's about shapeshifters and children who are snatched away by fairies. And Chris already mentioned my chapter book series, Diary of an Ice Princess, which I'm very excited about, and I'm going to be talking more about later. And then next year in 2020, I get to go back to middle grade, and I will have a novel coming out called A Wish in the Dark, which is a retelling of Les Miserables that's set in a magical world inspired by Thailand. I'm really excited to share that one with you guys. And then next fall, I've got my nonfiction account of the Thai cave rescue, and I will definitely be talking about that later this morning. So I want to tell you about myself because my background has really huge impact on the things that I write. So I'm the product of two really amazing families. And on the left there, you see my Texas grandparents and my Thai grandparents, and also two really important pieces of American legislation. So the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act that changed the quotas of who was allowed to immigrate to the United States. And that helped pave the way for my dad to immigrate from Thailand to the US in the 60s. And you see him there with his perm. Can you tell this picture was taken in the 80s because we both have matching perms? And also the Supreme Court ruling in 1967, Loving versus Virginia, that made it easier and more acceptable for my parents to get married and to have me. So this is my plug for voting and for getting involved in your government. So if you're not registered to vote, if you're watching from America and you're not registered to vote, please get registered to vote. I grew up in a small Texas town. And the reason I grew up there was because one day my dad was driving through and happened to notice that there were no Chinese restaurants in this town. So we moved there to take advantage of this great business opportunity. And we opened a Thai Chinese restaurant that's called the Golden Moon, and it's still there today. So if you are going to Weatherford, Texas, I highly recommend that you stop in, try the lunch special. It's a very good deal. So when we moved there, we were one of the few Asian families who lived in the whole town. And I was one of the few Asian American kids who went to my school. So you can imagine that I felt left out, felt very different a lot of the time. And I think if there's one thread that runs through all my books, even though my books are really different, it's a theme of feeling like you're from two very different worlds and just really trying to figure out where you fit within everything. So when I was a kid, I did not see myself in the books that I had access to. In those days, my library, I don't remember seeing books like In the Year of the Boar and Jackie Robinson, which was published at that time when I was young, and books by authors like Linda Sue Park and Tana Lai had not quite been published yet. So these are authors who paved the way for people like me. I think that I was probably 30, almost 30, when I saw the cover for Millicent Min, Girl Genius, by Lisa Yee. And I remember very distinctly being like, oh, what is that? Because that was the first time I had seen an Asian American girl on the cover of a book, and the story was all about her, just focused on her, and it was written by an Asian American author. So, I would have loved to have these books as a kid, but who I did have was Claudia Kishi. And if you were a child of the 80s, or maybe even if you're not, because Babysitters Club's making a big comeback, you probably remember the Babysitters Club. So, when I was a kid reader, I preferred fantasy. That was my jam, was fantasy books. But I made a huge exception for Babysitters Club because I loved Claudia. And it is a fact, an objective truth, that Claudia was the coolest babysitter in the Babysitters Club. And one of the great things about her, one of the things I loved about her so much, is that not only did I want to be Claudia, but all of my friends wanted to be Claudia because she was so cool. Kids do this thing where they're playing make-believe, and maybe you're going to play Babysitters Club, or you're going to play Descendants, and the kids call who they want to be. Like, I'm going to be so-and-so. I call her, I get to be her. And a lot of times when we would play that when I was a kid, I would not get to pick the character that I wanted to be. Like, if I wanted to be Cinderella, my friends would say, well, you can't be Cinderella. You don't look like Cinderella. She's blonde. But when we played Babysitter's Club, I got to call being Claudia, and everybody else wanted to be her. So that was really, really powerful for me. So, people always ask me, did you know you wanted to be an author when you were a kid? And I always say no. I had never met an author. As a kid, I never had an author come to my school. And I did not see Asian American authors in my library. It was just really not a job that was on my radar. When I got older and went off to college, I majored in engineering, and I became a mechanical engineer. Now, when I tell that to people, then I usually get some jokes about, oh, of course, you're an engineer, you're Asian American, model minority, you probably played the cello, and get some jokes about having a tiger mom. And I always kind of, I always laugh along, but kind of bristle at that on the inside, because really for me, that was not the reality. And I remind people that not all Asians are the same, which kind of seems like a silly thing that you have to remind people, but it's very true. So, for example, someone who has Thai heritage or Southeast Asian heritage is going to have a really different story about how their families came to America, what their circumstances were. They're going to have really different experiences from East Asians or South Asians. And of course, none of us is a monolith. And even within our own groups, all of us are very, very different and have very individual stories. So I present this because I think it's really important to push back against the myth of Asian Americans being a model minority, because it is a myth. And it's very damaging. It's damaging for Asian Americans. It's damaging for other people of color in America. And I think it really prevents us from taking a closer look at issues that are affecting Asian Americans, such as groups who are living in poverty, or who have a lower percentage of folks who are being able to go to college. So no tiger mom for me. I really didn't have pressure to go to college. No one was telling me, you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer. The mentality in our household was more of this scrappy mentality of, if you have opportunities, you have to take those opportunities, no matter what they are, whether that's being a scientist or owning a restaurant, because the people who came before you, your ancestors who came before you, didn't have those opportunities. So for me, the opportunity that came my way just did happen to be in science. So, I've always really liked science, really enjoyed STEM. And after I spent some time as an engineer, I went back to school. I got my master's degree in science education, and I started working in science museums. So I spent about a decade working in the field of informal science education, which is out of the classroom education. And during that time, I experienced what probably a lot of you can relate to, which is that I felt like in my work, the biggest impact that I was having was the very hardest thing to measure. So, I worked on a lot of grant funded programs, and our funders really love to see quantifiable results. They really like to see numbers. So they wanted to see numbers of kids served and percentages and graphs of, how we're moving the needle in our programs, even if our programs only lasted a few months. And I totally understood that they wanted us to be accountable because they were funding us. But at the same time, I knew that the most important things that we did for kids, things like getting them engaged and interested in science and, getting them excited, boosting their confidence and their level of comfort with STEM. Those were the most important things we did. And those were really difficult to measure in a satisfactory way for them. It's super difficult to measure with a pencil and paper test, right? And I know you guys can absolutely relate. And I'm going to go to the area of my work that I was the most passionate about, and I'm still very passionate about, was increasing the number of females and people of color working in STEM careers. So as you know, the world needs people to enter STEM, young people to choose STEM paths. We need all sorts of people to help solve problems that our world is facing, such as the climate crisis. But girls and children of color are dropping out of the STEM pipeline at higher numbers, even when they excel in those fields. And I learned that, well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I won't go into all of them, but one of them is that STEM has a big image problem. So some of you may be familiar with the Draw a Scientist test, which is where kids are asked to draw a picture of what they think a scientist looks like. So now, even though over the years, the number of kids who draw females and minority scientists has increased, kids still overwhelmingly draw someone who basically looks like a mad scientist, a white male wearing a lab coat with crazy hair, or this guy has a crazy mustache. And I want to point out there's this interesting caveat that goes along with the test that says, well, children actually might be drawing what they think the adult who is administering the test expects to see. And I think that's interesting because for me, that just shows that kids are really smart and they know what the stereotype of a scientist is, and they know what they have to draw to get you to recognize their drawing, right? So kids are so much smarter than they get credit for. We do tell them, we can tell them, you can be anything. They hear that a lot, don't they? For example, the kids that I was working with, I was working in a lot of Title I schools, and my science program that I was coming in to deliver was not the first science outreach program they had participated in. I wasn't the first person to show up with my bin of robots or my glue slime and try to show them science is cool. They had gotten that a lot. And I could tell them, you can be a scientist, you can be an engineer until the cows come home. But if the people they're working with and the engineers that they're seeing don't look like them, then that's giving them a completely different message. If you never get to see it, then how are you going to believe it when I tell you you can be it, right? So it's this whole you have to see it to believe it phenomenon. And that's when I learned the importance of role models, and specifically role models who represent the kids that are working with them. So when we had volunteers working our programs, or when we took kids on a field trip to visit with the National Society of Black Engineers or Women in Aerospace, well, then suddenly that's a whole new ball game. This is no longer just me talking to them, telling them these things. They're actually seeing it real life in front of them. It makes it true. So, when kids meet a person who shares their experiences and who looks like them, maybe has a family like theirs, and is doing this cool thing that they wanted to do, that suddenly puts it within reach. And the best way I can describe what that connection is like is that it's just electric. And I know that if you're working with kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say electric. It's that thing that's really hard to measure. And I think for most of us who haven't always seen ourselves represented in the spaces that we want to be, we distinctly remember that first time we met someone and had that electric connection. So like for me, I distinctly remember seeing Millicent Men. I distinctly remember the first time I saw Lisa Yee speak at a conference and what that meant for me. If we flash forward a few years to when my first book started coming out, I had the incredible experience of having that come full circle. So I had young people of color who read my books, and in particular Asian American kids, and tell me how excited they were to meet an author who looked like them, that they had never seen that before. So that was been just a super humbling experience for me. It's a role I definitely don't take for granted and I take really seriously. If you talk to other authors of color or Indigenous authors, I think they'll tell you the same thing, that connection that they have with kids, being on the other side of it as the author is just so important. Grace Lynn talks about this in her podcasts, in her Kidlit Women podcast and her Book Friends Forever podcast, about that connection. And just like Grace, this is one of the reasons that I support Own Voices books and Own Voices authors, because of the phenomenon that happens when you get to facilitate that interaction between kids and the authors, that electric moment. So I got further insights about representation in the experience of writing this last chapter book series of mine. So I was asked to write the Diary of an Ice Princess chapter books for Scholastic. So this is an IP project, which basically means that Scholastic had the concept, and the concept was, what if an ice princess went to a regular school, a regular elementary school? And so they were looking for a writer to flesh out the rest of the concept, to develop the characters and their backstory, and of course, to write all of the books. So now when you think of Ice Princess, you may be thinking of the same thing that I was thinking of, which is this. You probably were thinking of Frozen. And that's the first image that pops into my head when I first saw the proposal for the project. And my first reaction was, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can write an ice princess story, right? An ice princess is white and blonde and Scandinavian origin. She probably has a reindeer or a bear for a best friend. And really, the whole concept of princesses is kind of fraught for me. I had never seen princesses who looked like me as a kid. And I didn't feel a connection to wanting to write a typical princess story. So then I thought about it more, and I thought, well, why does that have to be a typical princess story? I thought, what if I don't do that? What if I write these books the way I would have loved to see them written as a kid? But I was super nervous to even try. I thought, what if the publisher, that's not what they want to see? What if readers don't want to see that? What if nobody wants to read this story? But I feel like I got really, really lucky, because by this time I had all of these fantastic books and authors who had already lit the way. I think we're living in this wonderful age, golden age of chapter books, where we're seeing more and more diverse titles than we ever have before, even though we absolutely definitely need more. And so I had these role models to look up to, right? I actually reached out to the author, Cynthia Leidig Smith, and asked her about it. So I told her how I was feeling and told her about my nervousness about this. And she was super encouraging and told me, definitely go for it. Definitely tell your publisher exactly how you feel, and let them know how important it is to you. So I did that, and my editor and the entire team at Scholastic was not only were they accepting of it, but they've been enthusiastically, wildly supportive, which has been amazing. So now we have Princess Lena, who is Scholastic's first chapter book princess of Asian descent. So I'm very excited about that. The response has been so great to the series. And I love that Lena's family looks like mine. So she's mixed race, just like I am. When I was growing up, my mom told me a story about when she and my dad were first married, that they went to a restaurant together and the waitress there refused to serve them because she didn't approve of their interracial marriage. So to have a book that celebrates a family like this, and to have kids of all backgrounds reading this story, that's just means so much to me. So despite the amazing response that we've been getting with Diary of an Ice Princess, I do want to share this review that we got early on in the days before the book was published. So this is someone who had an advanced review copy of the book, and they said, "This is a cute little book. There is unnecessary diversity, which I really don't like, especially since the main character is already half wind tamer, half human. I didn't think there was any reason to make her Chinese on top of it." So I shared this review online, and people got very angry on my behalf, and they absolutely had a right to be. So this review is born out of racism and the idea that Asian characters should only exist in stories that are about Asian folktales or moments in Asian American history, moments in the past, or stories about struggle. That is all through this review. And, I think people ask me, was I upset? Was I angry? And I absolutely was, but I think that I was more sad than I was angry. And I wasn't so angry at this particular person. I feel like the review came out of a place of ignorance. And I also know that this reviewer, just like me, is living under the shadow of racism and colonialism that has affected our whole society for a very long time and still affects our society. This kind of thinking is very damaging. It's damaging because when white Americans consume media that only portrays minorities in a certain way, in a stereotypical way, then it just reinforces those racist views and racial bias. And for non-whites, it can also have a harmful impact, for sure, on their self-concept. And I'll share a study that I read about that looked at the impacts of, it was specifically looked at Indian Americans who were either watching mainstream media, which is basically TV shows, movies that are produced in America that include Indian or Indian American characters, versus what happens when they view ethnic media, which is media that's produced either in India or by Indian American creators. And I found what you might expect, that when viewers have to see themselves in diminished roles or in stereotypical roles, it lowers their self-esteem, versus when they get to see themselves be at the center of the story in more of a nuanced role, then it boosts their pride in who they are and where they came from. One thing that I thought was really interesting in this study is that it used a survey to measure respondents' thoughts. And one of the items on that survey says, "I am a person of worth, at least on an equal plane with others." And that's really the point of all of this, isn't it? To make sure that all kids get to answer that question with a yes, that I am a person of worth. So this comes from Rudine Sims Bishop in her very important essay on mirrors and windows that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. She says, when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they're devalued in society. And that this is what I mean when I say kids are smart. They learn that lesson about how they're either valued or devalued, and they learn it in a split second, right? When they walk into the toy aisle of a store or into a movie theater or down the stacks of their library, they know instantly. You may be familiar with this infographic that's put out by the Cooperative Children's Book Center that illustrates how Indigenous children and children of color are underrepresented in books that should be written for them. So this is an artistic representation of Bishop's windows and mirrors metaphor. I like to look at this infographic in tandem with this one that's put out by Lee and Low. Because if you look, so this is showing the percentage of children's books that are written by or about people of color and Indigenous people. And you see the gray bars ticking up in recent years, which is fantastic. But this graph, I think also shows the whole picture, and it shows the impact of years of underrepresentation. Because when kids go into a bookstore or a library, even if in that year there were a lot of diverse titles published, they don't just see the books that are published in that year, right? They're seeing the cumulative effects of many years of racism and colonialism. So we still have a long way to go to achieve equity. And then I want to point out that many of the books that are written about IPOC are not written by IPOC. And this gets back to own voices, which I talked about before. And I've heard some people say, this is something we really need to be focused on with fiction, but nonfiction is a whole other ballgame because facts are facts. And I think there may have been a time when I would have agreed with that. But then I wrote a nonfiction book and I changed my mind. And I'm going to be talking about that briefly because I really think it illustrates how the person who's telling the story and who gets to be in the center of the story can change what readers get out of it. So now I'm going to tell you guys about my experience a little bit of writing All 13, which is the book about the Thai cave rescue, which will be coming out next year. So I don't have time to go into details about the rescue, which is a shame because it's like such a fascinating story. I could talk to you about it forever and ever. But I'm guessing that you know the general gist of the story. And if you're watching from all over the world, I bet you know the general gist as well, because all over the world, it was a huge media story, right? One of the biggest news stories the world has ever seen. And in Thailand, it was definitely the biggest news story in a very long time. So I was actually in Thailand visiting my family who live in northern Thailand when the rescue happened. So our plane touched down on the day that the boys went missing, and we were there for the entire time. We flew back to the US just as the boys were being extracted. And it was very interesting being in the country and seeing local media and how they were covering the story. So the coverage was on 24/7. So you constantly saw footage wherever you were, like in restaurants, bars, airports, they were always playing footage of the rescue. So I was seeing pictures of Thai people and video of Thai people, all of the volunteers, the military, the parents, the boys' friends, this happened in a really small town. And it was a very close-knit community. So you can imagine that something like this just consumed the whole community and affected everyone there. And really, even all over Thailand, no matter where you were, you got this feeling that these boys represented, they could have been your son or your nephew or your cousin or your best friend. Everyone felt very connected to the boys who were trapped in the cave. So I actually flew home just as they were starting to bring out the boys. And that was also interesting because when I got back, I was fascinated by how different the media coverage was, and that the focus here was almost entirely on the Western rescuers, that they had become the center of the story. Especially Elon Musk. People were really focused on how Elon Musk was participating in the rescue. And that's very interesting because I think out of everyone, he probably played the smallest role. But if you go back and you look at media stories, he has probably the largest presence of anyone. So, don't get me wrong. I firmly believe that the British divers, the European divers, the American military, the people from all over the world who were part of the rescue are heroes. There is no doubt in my mind, and that's very clear in my book. But I felt this shift away from Thai people being in the center of the story when I got back over here. Now, being Thai American, I am used to having stories about Thailand filtered through a Western lens. Growing up, did not see many depictions of Thai people or Thailand in the media, aside from The King and I. That was probably the only time I remember Thailand being represented in the media, was watching The King and I. And of course, this is not the real Thailand, okay? Thailand is not like The King and I. It's definitely not like The Beach or Hangover Part 3. Those are not accurate representations of the country. So, knowing that the cave rescue is going to be this huge opportunity for people all over the world to learn about Thailand, I wondered if I could write a book that let readers see what I had seen. Could I give a different lens to look through, to view the story through? I really feel like when you have insight into the place and the people and the culture there, that's when you can grasp, the facts. Yes, facts are facts, but to understand the significance of the facts, I think you need to understand all these other things too. So in order to do that, I felt like I had to go back to Thailand. I had to go to that town where the kids lived and meet the people who had worked so hard to get them out. And then here I am with my dad, who is my handy dandy translator. And so I interviewed a lot of the people who were there on the ground from day one, even before the rescue started getting a lot of international attention. So these folks, their names were not known in the Western media, but I guarantee they worked just as hard as the men whose names became well known. I met with community members. I got to meet some of the boys' parents and their family. Some of the most important research that I did for me was to go to temples and speak to the monks who knew the coach and who knew the boys. Meditation was a really big part of the story. I'm sure you guys have heard that it was something that helped keep the boys going and helped keep them alive. But also I feel like it's important to understand Buddhism, and especially Thai Buddhism, which is very unique. That helps give you a deeper insight into why the rescuers and the parents and the government officials did things the way they did or made the decisions that they did. And I had this incredible experience. It was really last minute, a complete surprise that I got to actually meet with the boys who were in Los Angeles at the time. They were visiting Los Angeles. I met them the night before they went on the Ellen show. I can't tell you how happy I was to meet them, because writing a book about them, I felt like I had to know them. And one of the biggest themes in my book is that these boys are heroes in their own rights. They survived these wretched conditions for 10 days with no food, underground, and the way that they were raised and the people that they are is a huge part of how they survived. And my big goal in the book was to move them and to move the Thai people back into the center of the story, which is where I think they should be. And I hope I did that, at least. I think we'll know. We'll see. When the book comes out next year, you can tell me if I did that. So, I apologize if it's a little bit loud in here. We're getting some rain, which has not happened in a very long time. So if I have a really big smile on my face, it's because I'm with you, but also because it's raining and Texas needs rain really bad. So, I want to end on a hopeful note, a happy note, because I'm really excited to see where children's books are going in the next few years. I see the titles that are coming out now and the titles that are lined up for the next year or so. And we've got some really amazing, diverse books that are coming out. And I remind myself that, for all of our good intentions, publishing is a business. And as a business, it will increase supply to meet demand. So what that means to me is that there is an increased demand for diverse titles, which is fantastic. I think a big part of that, a big reason for that is an increased awareness that we've got due to the hard work of people like Dr. Debbie Reese and Sarah Park Dalen and the team who's behind We Need Diverse Books, who've been working so hard to make sure we're more aware of this issue. But I also think a huge part of that is the work that's being done by educators. So educators are asking for and demanding these titles because they know how important it is to be able to, create that electric connection in their students. They know what that is. They've seen that firsthand, and they're requesting this. And publishers are listening. Educators are a huge, huge force in publishing. I hope you know that you have a superpower, and publishers are listening to them, and you are part of the reason that the needle is getting moved. So for those of you who are selecting diverse titles and supporting those books and advocating for those books for your kids, I just want to say thank you so much, and please keep it up. You're doing very, very good work. I'm sure most of you know that as of this summer, we have passed the mark where the majority of children in America are minorities. So they're non-white for the first time. And all of those kids deserve to have books, to read books that show them they are worthy. I've said it many times during this talk that kids are smart. And they know it when they see it. And so when we tell them, you can be anything, you can do anything, we better be prepared to back it up. And one of the places we can back it up is in the books that they read. And so that those are places where they can see themselves as, a wizard or as a detective at the center of a story, as an engineer or as an author or as an ice princess, or even as a superhero. So this is my genius and brilliant segue to end my talk and to tell you that you definitely need to come back and stick around for Min Lay's talk. Wasn't that genius, Chris?
Right when it came up on the screen, I was like, we couldn't have scripted that better. That was beautiful.
And I'll also say, this is not a real jade ring. This is my wannabe Green Lantern ring, but I wore it in honor of Min, and I'm hoping he'll let me in the Green Lantern Club.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christina, so much. You'll see after, when you scroll through Twitter, just how many people, we've all just been so moved and inspired, pushed and challenged to do better from what you've shared today. Just to say a few, Christine wrote, really appreciate Christina calling out reviews rooted in racism, and then further adding that the result of systemic racism and colonization. Lizeth is just saying wow about the stories you shared about the Thai boys and especially the news media coverage. And she, like all of us, can't wait for the book. Just keep writing faster, all of them, quick, we need them. Truly, it was just such a gift to have you here this morning with us. Thank you again for being a
Thank
part
you
of our
guys. Thank
morning.
you, Chris, so much. And everybody have fun today. It's going to be a great day.
Thank you. And like Christina said, stick around for Min. It's going to be awesome too at the end. So just a few quick announcements here before you can head off into choosing your upcoming sessions. I'm also hoping that we can give you some tips on where you'll go and what you'll do next. So again, if you loved, why am I saying if? I know you loved Christina's message this morning. So please, if you don't already, do visit her website, follow her on social media. And I know many of you who don't already have all of her books are filling your various carts at this time online right now too. Yeah, I just could go on and on. Coming up in our session 1, we have 3 workshops to choose from. You can find those by following us at the EdCollab on Twitter or by going to our main site, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, and finding those along the top menu bar. We have a session by Carla Anlus on centering the voices and experiences of bilingual Latinx students in our classrooms. A session by Candy and Meredith on It All Starts with a Sentence. This is particularly focused on elementary grades, so please join there if you're interested in doing some sentence and word work with primary and elementary students. And then Troy Hicks will be leading a session on examining multimedia nonfiction as mentor text. So those are workshops 1, 2, and 3. When you are tweeting, I was given this reminder to make sure I tell you, please use our official hashtag the EdCollab Gathering. That's the main one to use. That's the one that we're retweeting from and responding to, and you can respond to other people. When you go into a workshop, please use hashtag the EdCollab Gathering space hashtag the workshop numbers. So if you're going to tweet from Troy Hicks's, I would put the EdCollab Gathering space hashtag number 3. A few other quick things. One is we got cool merch. It feels weird to talk about merch, but we also think that it's really cool looking and we worked really hard on it. So we hope that you like it too. Merch is the one of the small ways that you can help to keep our programming free. But we also don't just like to ask you for money. Instead, we want you to have cool stuff. So if you follow the little merch button, you can see cool things like, I'm particularly proud of this bag that I helped to design, the EdCollab Gathering, because PD in my PJs is a mood. So you have that. There's you can start the sentence with and shirt and other things that have it on it. Books are my best friend. Language is never neutral. The Paulo Freire quote, and there's lots of other cool stuff there, including the EdCollab light bulb sticker. So if you like cool stuff and you want to help support us in that way, please check out our merch button. It feels so weird to say it, but We think the stuff is pretty cool. More importantly, whatever you would have spent to just be in the audience, to be there live with Christina sharing that incredible keynote this morning, or the coffee that maybe you would be walking to go get at some coffee place that you love around the convention center, please take what you would be spending today and pay the joy forward. Christina has adopted for us Circle of Health International. Min has adopted for us an Open Book Children's Literacy Foundation, or you can truly donate anywhere. We would really love it if today, when you donate, you tag hashtag the EdClab Gathering to share that that's what you're doing, so that we can continue to inspire others to do the same too. So enjoy the upcoming donate, you tag hashtag the EdClab Gathering to share that that's what you're doing, so that we can continue to inspire